snow day, and that's when CPS was coming in. But I sent out a video of the past class I did with CPS, so just watch that. I sent out a couple more videos of that Brian had uploaded, and the human trafficking and immigration video too, so take a look at that. Yeah, and so then another thing is I looked at the doodle. Thank you for everybody who did the doodle. We are going to decide that the last class is going to be on April 5th, which is a Thursday, from 6 to 9. We'll invite all of the managers out and talk about how to get involved with Tahoe Safe Alliance. You'll do the quiz, and we'll do a quick graduation, and I usually bring pizza, if everybody likes pizza. Do we have any vegetarians? Yes, okay. I could do vegetarian pizza, that's cool, to celebrate. And so that would be the day. If you can't make that day, please reach out to me and just set up a time so you can come into the office and take your quiz so I can give you your certificate of completion, okay?
So we have class next week then?
No.
Okay, because you said last class was April 5th.
April 5th. So because of all the snow days,
Yes.
it's pushed classes out. Our last class will be this Thursday, and then there's spring break and a couple other, and then our graduation class will be
And the test.
April 5th. And
Then
the
we
test.
just watch the videos that the classes we've missed.
Yes.
And let you know then when we've read these. or
Yep, just
watch
shoot
them.
me an email once you watch them back, and just say, hey, I watched them, so we can sign off on that.
Answer the homework questions, so that should tell you if you've watched them.
Do we need to watch them all by the 22nd still?
By the 5th.
Okay.
Yep, so I'll extend
So,
that
no class
deadline to the 5th.
Next week.
That's next week.
All
So all
right?
3 days next week are off?
Yes.
Last class
Dang
is when?
snow days, dang snow days.
Thursday.
April.
This Thursday.
All right.
April
is our test.
April is our test.
I know.
I'm like, wait a minute.
All
Oh,
right,
okay.
and so we're gonna give a head start already, and we'll wait for Mr. Josh to come in, if he shows.
Spoke to him today?
Uh,
Yeah, I
she did,
He did, okay.
yeah,
If there's an
so,
emergency, I guess.
sure,
Is he
yeah,
on duty right now? Yeah.
fair enough.
It's my day
So,
off, so.
tonight is
Well,
our
thank you.
law enforcement panel, and Sage has came from Placer County, and this is a panel to ask questions about how law enforcement and their involvement in domestic violence, how that looks, and all that kind of stuff. So I have some questions, but if you have some questions that come up, please feel free to write them down, and we'll ask them at the end, and then raise your hand, and we can ask them. Okay? So I'll have you introduce yourself, and we'll start with questions.
Okay, so first of all, I'm Sage Barasa. I'm with Placer County Sheriff's Office. I'm a sergeant now. I've been in law enforcement for 18 years. I started out with Sausalito PD for 4 years on patrol, and then I came here, did patrol up here for a little bit, and then I went into investigations, and I was our crimes against persons detective for 9 years. And about a year and a half ago, I got promoted to sergeant, and they put me back out on the street. And so now I'm working nights, so I'm a little out of it today. I'm not feeling all that great, so hang with me if I'm a little slow. Yeah, so a lot of experience with the sexual assaults and stuff for 9 years. That was my main caseload, was dealing with domestic violence as well that came to investigations, but a lot of it was the child molested sexual assaults. I did bring, I hope there was enough. This is a big class. It was bigger than I expected. I hope everybody was able to get one, or we can share if you didn't.
Give me copies.
I think just like a few, 3 or 4.
I can make
sorry,
copies
you
and
wanna
bring
make
them to the
copies?
next class.
Yeah, if you want to grab one and make copies for them as we go through, because everybody should have one.
Can somebody raise their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
It's like the one with Messy Ball.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you, I appreciate that. So we'll start going through it. I'll just kind of give an overview about a domestic violence call, going kind of through this, and you guys can keep this, that way you kind of know how it works for us. Most of our domestic violence calls come in through dispatch. It's usually a neighbor or somebody else. Every once in a while, it is the actual victim calling for help, but a lot of times they're not the actual caller. A lot of times it's a third party that witnessed something or heard something or is concerned, or a welfare check type call. When we know it's a domestic violence situation, we always send 2 deputies. If I'm closer and I get there before the other person, there he is. If I get there before the other person, then I'm gonna wait. So it's a 2-person response unless it's crucial to come in right away. I'll pause, come on in.
This is your chair.
Oh, wow.
Andrea,
Hi, Andrea.
nice to see you again.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for my tardiness. It's been a
Okay.
day.
So Sage is just filling us in about what a domestic violence call looks like
Okay.
coming in.
We'll stop and have you introduce yourself and give a little background of your experience first.
Okay. My name's Josh Palmer. I'm a sergeant with the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Incline Village. I have 20 years on the job. 10 of that was in detectives. 2 of that was a domestic detective. 8 of that was a homicide detective. I've been on patrol all the other time. Seen a lot of stuff, and just here to answer any questions you guys have so we can all work together to help the victims in domestic violence. Cycle violence is a real thing that is overlooked quite often, so whatever I can do to help.
Thanks.
So I brought just a breakdown, and then hopefully maybe we have an extra copy, because I want you to have one too. So we can go along, because there's some differences between Nevada and California. Not too many, but the laws are slightly different. So we'll mention a couple of those differences as we go through. So we're just starting in the beginning. I guess we'll just kind of team tag it.
Sure, yeah.
Go through it together. And so I was just telling them that most of these calls come in a lot of times from a third party, a neighbor, somebody hearing it, and sometimes it is the victim, or they might call and then cancel us. The last one I just had, they called and said we need help, and then they called back and said, oh, everything's fine. Well, we're still going to respond. We're going to go. Once we know there's a problem, we need to put eyes on to make sure that everything's okay, because who knows what's going on behind those closed doors. So we're still going to respond, 2-officer response. I think you guys are the same.
Yep.
And so then when we get on scene, I was saying actually that's where it was. I'll back up. I told these guys earlier I'm really tired, so I'm going to hop around a little bit, so I'm sorry. I apologize. But if I do arrive on scene and my partner's not there yet, if it's something life-threatening, I am going to be going in anyway. Law enforcement is not going to sit and wait for their second if it's life-threatening. And they're the same. That's
Same
the
thing.
same
If we
across
hear
the
that
board.
active sounds of violence is the phrase we use, is active sounds of violence. So it's the same with a domestic call or an active shooter. If we hear something like that, then we just go.
Yeah. And we'll just go and we can go right into the house if there's something to that level. If we believe it's somebody's life's in jeopardy, then we won't even wait for somebody to answer the door. We'll just go right through the door or window or however we can make access to help. In that type of situation. But usually the most normal calls, or not normal, there's nothing normal about it, but the usual call that we'll get, you might hear arguing or whatever when you're at the front door, and then we'll be looking through the windows. We listen before we usually knock just to try to figure out what we've got going on, because we want to do everything as safe as we can for us as well as for whoever's inside the house. And then, usually we can make contact through the door and just knock and have somebody come out and contact us. Immediately, we're going to separate parties. It's a chaotic situation, and you got people that are really emotional about this situation. And so they're just going to continually scream at each other, usually, when we're there. So if you don't separate them, you can't even speak to the people because they're so emotional. And so you're going to separate them. So a lot of victims have complained, later, well, why were you guys so rude? I'm the victim. And you come in and you grab me and you yank me away and say, hey, you've got to come over here. When we first get there, we just want safety. Safety for everybody. We're not going to maybe be the politest every time because we need to get them apart and get the party safe so that we can find out what we have and what's going on.
Absolutely right. Getting them separated because the passion of the moment, everybody wants to just continue that argument, and then they want to get their last say in when we're there so they can win the fight in front of us, so to speak. So we make sure to separate. We still keep an eye on our partner so that we know that each other's safe. So we try to work the angles a little bit, keep them out of eyesight. We try to keep each other in eyesight, and then try to just establish what what happened, if we even need to intervene or not. Generally, we do. A lot of times, the one I just left was the 14-year-old daughter called. So we get a lot of kids that call. I mean, even all the way down to 5 years old, mommy and daddy are fighting. I mean, it's rarely the victim that calls. It's usually a neighbor or kids. A mom from out of state or a family member from out of state will call and say they're fighting. And because of Facebook and Snapchat and all these things that are out there now, the reporting goes through all these third parties and things, and we just get hit with them from wherever. So it's a little complicated sometimes, but ultimately it's two people arguing and we try to figure it out. Yes, sir?
What do you do if you get there and there's small children involved and the parents are one at each other? What do you do with the children?
Well, we try to soothe them as much as we can while still being safe with the parents. And a lot of times we'll say, hey, just calm down while you're in front of your kids and let's just figure this out. And generally people do. If they don't, we do what we have to do, and the kids are unfortunate witnesses to that sometimes. But usually talking to people and asking them not to do that in front of their kids works pretty well. And then in Nevada, anytime kids are involved, we have to contact our Child Protective Services just to make sure there's no history there and anything else that we need to be looking at as far as the protection of the children.
Do you guys interview the children?
We do general, but we don't go very far with them per policy.
Per policy?
Yeah.
So with us, we interview the children. If it's extreme, if it's an extreme abuse, say, the victims, got great bodily injuries, we'll actually do a forensic interview with
Correct.
the children,
Yeah.
which I know is the same for you guys. And so, and we'll get more into that later when we talk about the sexual assaults and child molest. But we actually have a center just for children to interview children, and there's specialists that do the interviews. But that's only if it's a really high-level felony, very violent felony that we'll use, or like in a child molest case. But going back to DV, we usually don't have to use them unless it's really bad. Otherwise, we'll do the interviews there on scene, because the kids, whatever they say, the kids are usually the most honest that you can get. And so for the court and our district attorney's office really wants those child statements. So when we're out there, we'll pull the kids aside too and keep them away from mom and dad, because we don't want them to be influenced by mom and dad and what they say, and say, what happened here? What did you see, or what did you hear? So.
And we'll ask those general statements.
Yeah.
We will ask those general statements, depending on the age, of course.
Yeah. Exactly. And then for us, just like to finish the question, for Placer County, we also are a mandate that we report. We have to report. If there's any domestic violence and kids are in the home, even if they didn't see it, even if they were in their bed sleeping and they didn't even know about it, I have to contact CPS. It's part of our policy as well. So, so going on, okay, so we got to statements from both parties, so we will try to keep out of earshot, like he was saying, when we're getting the statements, because we want to get as truthful as we can. We want to find out what happened. Obviously, the first thing after we got parties separated is medical. So now we have the scene static. If we want to bring in medical or need medical, we can have medical come in. Most of the time on these domestic violence situations, they will stage if there's a reason to think that there's something really bad, like a kid saying, dad hit mommy with a hammer or something really bad. We're going to have medical stage then, so that they're right there, but we have to go in before fire can come in and make sure that it's a safe scene for the medical to come in. So as soon as we have that separated, that would be the next step. Does anybody need medical treatment? And then we have the ambulance come in.
Exact same procedure for us. Has to be safe for them to be able to do what they need to do. The scene has to be safe.
So then, of course, it goes into the statements. We're going to collect witness statements, like I said already, with the children, also neighbors, anything like that. It's going to depend on what they said happened. We have just, I think Washoe was the same, we have 2 levels. We have our misdemeanor and our felony domestic violence. And so with the felony domestic violence, just means that there's some kind of injury. If it's a visual injury, it makes it a felony. So if somebody's got a black eye, even, a cut, if it's a little scratch, that's going to be probably more on the misdemeanor side. But anything above that, anything that we can actually articulate that they're injured, more than a complaint of pain.
In Washoe County, Nevada, it's a higher burden to get to the felony. It's a misdemeanor unless it rises to the rate what would normally be a felony crime. So we have associated crimes, false imprisonment, if they prevent them from leaving the room or the house or something like that, that's a felony. If they create some kind of substantial bodily harm, then it's a felony. But a misdemeanor battery, unless it creates some kind of significant damage, is still a misdemeanor in Nevada.
What about taking a cell phone away? What would that be considered when somebody's trying to contact law enforcement?
Then for us, it's interruption of 911.
Okay.
And that's, well, depends. They will charge a felony, but I've never seen it prosecuted as a felony.
Yeah, we're the same, misdemeanor.
So
you
for
know,
it to be a
separate
felony,
charge.
it needs to actually like have caused bodily injury in Nevada?
Significant bodily.
Significant bodily, so they might even get away with it just bloody their nose possibly or something.
Mhm.
Or just,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Maybe explain what's significant.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah,
between battery and
significant.
assault, is there a distinction between those
So
two?
if you left a scar, if there's potential to leave a scar, a concussion, which is a lot of times what happens, you'll have a concussion. So
Wow.
getting the statements from the doctors about what the level of injury is important for us so that we can bump it up in those violent situations. Otherwise, if it's a black eye and there's no other permanent or significant injury that affects the eyesight, and it kind of goes back and forth on what significant would be. They say permanent injury, but permanent injury is subjective still. So there's a lot of argument to that.
Mhm.
So we'll charge it and then let them figure it out in court.
Yes, we're lucky actually in California because it makes it a lot easier. Of course, we're arresting for a felony does not mean that a felony is going to stay. And, you know,
Right,
the district
yeah.
attorney's office will still drop it down, you know, which we'll get to that a little more detail later. But yeah, it's pretty easy for us to go felony on a domestic violence, you know.
It's difficult for us.
What about a repeat offender? So it's small, but you keep going to that same residence. So it's like 10 times you've seen similar minor injuries. Does that change it or?
At prosecution level, it does. At the arrest level, it doesn't for us.
We're exactly the same.
For prosecution, they will step it up every time. The second one would be a felony of conviction maybe, and then it would go from there. The prosecution level is very hard to answer any questions on because it changes with every case. Every case is negotiated different. It just is.
And I have one more on follow-up on that, and emotional abuse, which is not physical, but just as bad. Because you're saying what you go on is what you see. And when someone's emotionally abusing someone, that can be even worse. So is that they need to be physically harmed for you to be able to do something legally?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's true for California too. And if you think about it, it's pretty hard to prove any of
Yes.
that, you know what I mean? Because I always say, oh yeah, he's calling me names, he's a jerk, he's mean, he's this, he's that, and they're calling each other, you know, all these awful names and stuff. It's really hard for us to prove that somebody is being really beat down mentally, and we don't have any crimes to cover that.
And we'll include that in an investigation. If you do a proper investigation, you'll include all of those things that the victim tells you, the signs of it. We had one recently, she wasn't allowed to have a job, she wasn't allowed to have a driver's license, she wasn't allowed to leave the house except for certain times. Well, we document all that so that way, when it gets to court, they don't plead it down as easy, and if you go that extra mile and make sure that you document all those things properly, then it helps a lot in court, because it almost takes it out of the DA's hand to plead it down, if they were inclined to do so.
Mhm. Yeah. Very good point. So we'll go back a little bit more with the misdemeanor and felony for us, and I know this is different in Washoe. So for us, with a felony, it's a mandatory shall arrest. So we have to, by law, arrest no matter what the situation is. On a misdemeanor, we don't have to arrest. So if it's a misdemeanor, it is encouraged by our policy, but that is the actual words in our policy, is that you are encouraged to arrest on a misdemeanor, but you don't have to. So we can, or if there's a situation where we think it's not going to continue, we can separate parties. You know, there's kids involved, and maybe it's better for the kids if we don't take one off to jail or something. You know, there's certain situations that maybe we won't take them to jail. But I'd say 90% of the time we do, even on a misdemeanor, we do take them to jail, but we don't have to.
For us on a misdemeanor domestic, we have to if we can establish a primary physical aggressor. So if we can establish the primary physical aggressor, then we must arrest on a domestic battery, misdemeanor. And that obviously can get tricky sometimes trying to establish who hit who first. So you just do the best you can with what you got, and if you can't determine it, sometimes both people will go to jail.
Yeah.
I mean, and if there's mitigating circumstances, kids, age, because the elderly have domestic violence also, then we can not arrest in those certain circumstances that we have to document. And every domestic we respond to has to have a report written, regardless of the outcome.
And we're the same in that way, even if we don't arrest or anything, we're still got to document everything, for sure. So we offer, which is the same, I think, for both of us, we offer emergency protective order if we have domestic violence. The victim, we'll sit down and talk to them about it. A lot of times they don't want it. We will encourage it depending on the situation, and of course the severity, what happened and what's going on, or how many times we've been out there, what we know about the family and their situation. We do encourage it, but a lot of them don't want it. An emergency protective order, though, is only good for 5 business days for the state of California anyway. That is pretty much just to give them a chance to go and get a restraining order, to come and meet with you guys and get a temporary restraining order. It's just giving them a chance that week to do that.
Ours are 14 to 30 days for a protection order for domestic violence. There's a lot of different orders in between there, but for domestic violence, it's 14 to 30 days. And again, we encourage everybody to get one just for that kind of cooling off period. And it's a judge that issues that the following day. Most people do not do it. We give them all the information for every service they could probably have that is out there. We have special forms of flyers to give everybody. I've found that it's very imperative for the investigation and for the victim to not fall back into that cycle of violence, because there's always the day after regret of how am I going to pay my bills? Is he going to kick me out of the house? All these things that go on. To have follow-up from a victim advocate, or we don't have a detective that at our department anymore. They've cut that due to budget for domestic. So now having that follow-up is imperative to try to break that cycle. So we have a good victim advocate at our department that does very well at following up and trying to push people into just helping themselves, because we can't help them unless they're willing to help themselves, but they need to know that there's a rope to pull on. So I found that if you don't have that follow-up, then they'll fall right back into that cycle.
Is there like a program of some type that helps like victims that are going through it, who are in situations where they're afraid to lose their security of like their home, they don't work, it'd be a while, I don't know the scenarios, but is there some that like help offer them education or employment opportunities?
There are a lot of services
to
out
give
there.
them the confidence to walk away from a relationship that's abusive like that,
Yes, there's a lot of services that are out there, and our victim advocate, I know you guys have a great victim advocate program. They do great about steering people to the right program for them. So there's a lot of independent, charity-based programs that help, and then there's victims of crime funding if they're injured significantly. There's a lot of different avenues. They just have to choose to do it.
Get down.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll refer them to community-based agencies like Tahoe Safe Alliance, where we can help them do rental assistance, so they don't
Right, 'cause I can see
somebody
that.
always paid the rent and now he's in jail.
Yeah, you'd be afraid, that's
Sure.
insecurity, that's the unknown prospects of your life is fearful, and it can definitely keep somebody in
Sure.
an abusive cycle, for sure.
Yeah.
Most definitely,
And then a lot of times, we have to encourage victims a lot because of that reason. That exact reason is why we have to encourage victims to be honest with us about what's going on. A lot of times they just keep lying. And we know, when you've been a cop for 20 years, you know when people are,
yeah.
pulling your leg. You're like,
20 years,
okay.
hopefully, you know.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a lot of finesse. You know, I always said that, you know, a good cop has to be able to be a really good communicator, because if you're not a good communicator and you can't read people and you can't work with people, you can't be a good cop, you know? Because you have, especially in these situations, you have a victim that's not gonna wanna cooperate because they're like, I got 3
This is my
kids,
livelihood,
he
yeah.
puts the food on the table, he supports me, he supports the kids are gonna be on the street, I'm gonna be on the street,
Yeah, it's,
I can't cooperate.
we had a Native woman in here who shared with us about this, and her father was a very abusive man, and like she said, when he was gone, their lifestyle was gone. You know, like that he was a provider, even though he was a very abusive man, he always put everything on the table. They had vehicles, they had land, and they lost all that when it was like summer work guns. I can't remember the exact situation, but, so we just, yeah, I remember that well, I remember, yeah. So.
Joe and
It does
Rebecca.
happen.
Yeah, so in the case of it's in California, if it's a misdemeanor and the person's arrested, how long are they held?
There's a certain bail amount, and honestly, I don't know what the bail amount, so they can make bail. I just don't know exactly what that is off the top of my head, but they have that choice to pay bails, to pay for their bail. So if they pay and post bail, then they could be out the next day. I think you have a hold period, we don't.
We have a 12-hour hold.
12-hour hold.
Because I was wondering about that in relation to the restraining order, like how long does it take if the person's in jail overnight and the victim has to get a restraining order, can they get one that quick so that the person at least can't come back to the house until they've figured something else out, you know?
Yeah, for us, that's that 5-day, you know, it's 5 business days, so it's really 7 days, because there's always a weekend in there. So for 7 days, that's that emergency protective order. So I just call a judge right there while I'm sitting with the victim, call him up and say, do you authorize this protective order? And then I sign the judge's name on there right there that, you know, I spoke to Judge so-and-so, or presiding so-and-so, and I give it to them, and then if they're in jail, they're served right then and there. So they know about it, so now the warrant's good, and it's good for that 7 days.
So regardless then, at least they can't come back to the...
They can't. I mean, obviously, they could post bail and
Right.
come back, but we'll come arrest them for that.
Right.
But, yeah, they're not supposed to, and they've been told by law enforcement that you will be arrested if you come within, usually it's 100 yards. 100 yards of where the victim works, lives. Even if they live in that house, they're not allowed to go to their house. They're not allowed to even go get their things. We do have a thing called civil standby that we can work with the victim and law enforcement where the, you know, when the suspect gets out, he can go to the house to get his stuff, but the victim could be not there, and law enforcement will be there, or law enforcement could be there and the victim be there. We just work with the victim on what's comfortable and what's gonna work.
So the protective service is like shorter than the restraining order. It's a certain, like a week, the restraining order is for a longer period of time.
Yeah, so the emergency, for us, it's totally different in Washington, but for us, it's a week of an emergency protective order. So it's 1 week, and that's all they have with that. But it's pretty much so they can come and file for a temporary restraining order, which a temporary restraining order is 30 days. And then at that 30 days is time for them to get in front of a judge and discuss if that order should be there or not. And then the judge can decide if they're gonna put a long-term order in there, where, you know, it's 6 months, a year, or whatever.
Yeah, thanks.
Becca?
Oh, yeah, I was just, excuse me. As far as with the kids, how often do you see them willing to open up to you guys and about what they saw or heard? Or is the, like, what percentage of them are super hesitant versus willing to, like, talk to you guys?
They're usually pretty open.
Yeah.
I think that
Good luck
they
with kids
were.
talking to
I
us,
just-
yeah.
I mean, you get a shit, you know, they might be shy.
Yeah.
Especially when
yeah.
the cops all, you know,
Yeah,
especially if they're
for
young
sure.
and they're little and all these cops are in their house and, you know, it's a traumatic night. They definitely could be kind of shy about it, but they usually want to talk.
Yeah, it's probably 90% that
Mhm.
they now, when they get older and they're teenagers, you know, they're difficult anyways. So, but-
So just
But
keep that
pretty
in
good.
mind when we talk about DV and when the district attorneys come in and talk about how they'll say kids lie. Proof that a lot of times they're not.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because we
Yeah.
learned that in one of our classes.
Yeah.
So the
Just
teenagers.
Well, in the
somewhere.
child abuse, it was saying a myth is
Oh,
that
yeah.
kids lie. That's not the truth. It was saying that a lot of people believe that kids, when they say or disclose sexual abuse or things like that, they're lying. But it's not, you know, and they're
Yeah.
probably one of the best testimonies you can get.
Kids are horrible liars, and you can.
Right, yes.
Well,
They haven't learned the lying skills yet.
as-
I passed out a referral to, what we give out and it's part of our policy that we give that referral out. So just we have them in Spanish and we have them in English.
I think there's some extra Spanish ones over there that were handed
Oh,
out.
I had some
No,
extra
I don't.
Spanish here.
Yeah.
So it just, we have to, per policy, give that to the victim so that they have the phone numbers, they have people that they can call and contact.
Let me know if I need to make copies.
I don't have any.
Who has one that I can go make copies?
This is a big class.
At least do it.
That's fine. Spanish is fine.
We got one for it.
They're all Spanish?
Just the ones you gave out right now.
It's okay, we got it.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize they were all Spanish. I thought I brought half and half. So anyway, yes, we hand that out so that they have it, and we actually have to attach that to our report. And report's not signed off unless that's been attached and given to the victim.
We have a very similar form, and I'm sorry I didn't bring any. However, they're,
Available online.
they are. Mhm.
Since we handed out the Spanish form, how easy is it to get interpreters out on scene, or how many of your officers are bilingual, or?
It can be tough for us.
I'll be
We
honest.
only have a couple that speak Spanish. I know I've even called over for Truckee because they have a couple that speak Spanish over here. And so if they're working, I'll have them come over and help. We can use the AT&T translation line. It's miserable. But if you have nothing, then that's where you end up. Yeah.
Same answer. Depends on who's working. We do have a lot of Spanish-speaking deputies, but, you know, they're mostly working down in Reno, so if we're lucky to have the couple that are up in Incline, then good, but otherwise, you just do the best you can. A lot of times we'll have kids translate for us, the basics, right? And, most of the time the kids speak English, so.
Yeah.
You just do the best you can with what you have. Sometimes you just gotta make it work, and it's not pretty all the time.
No.
It's tough to find. I think of like how to get to be a police officer and all you have to go through, right? All the like 7 different steps of testing and psychological stuff and all that. And then not only like have to be bilingual, it's gotta be really hard to find bilingual officers.
It is, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, we even pay like an extra, I think, 5 or 10% or something if you're bilingual. Yeah, trying to encourage people to come and apply with us at our.
That's my time.
My agency.
Yeah, I'm a police officer.
Yeah.
We kind of covered the child protective services a little bit earlier, but it is mandatory for us as part of our policy that we contact if there's kids, even if, like I said, they didn't witness it, even if they weren't there, if there's kids in the home and there's domestic violence going on, we're going to notify Child Protective Services, and we're also going to fill out a suspected child abuse report. Not that we believe the kids are being abused, but that's just what we call our report. Line, the form that we use that goes through, it's on a suspected child abuse report.
We do the same, we just don't fill out a report for it. We just notify CPS and they complete their report on their side. We don't have to do a physical report for it. Yeah.
Extra paper.
We just write CPS was notified at the bottom of our report and who was notified and at what time.
Who you spoke to. Yeah. For us, and I'm probably the same for Washoe, you have to have your report done before you go home. Any arrest reports are that way for us, and so that report has to be written by the end of your shift.
What about if you arrest both of the parents and the children are there? Like, what do you guys do with the children if you just have to arrest both of the parents?
We try really hard not to do that, and I don't even think in my whole career I have arrested both parents when I have children involved. Usually, we call it the dominant aggressor, and so whoever the dominant person is going to be, so it's not always the first person that threw the punch or the person that started the fight. I mean, I could come up and get in your face and be calling you all these names and pushing your buttons and everything, and then you punch me, and then I hit you back, and it's going to be in the end, we're going to sort through all of that and go, who was the person that was the most dominant in this fight? And that's the person we're going to arrest, even if they're both in violation of domestic violence, even if they both were hitting each other. So in those situations, we try to leave the kid with whoever's the calmest, most reasonable out of the two, and the other one goes to jail, even if it's the mom. I've arrested several females. It's not always the males nowadays, which is You know, good and bad. It shouldn't be happening at all, but I'm glad that the women are actually, it's more and more they're standing up for themselves, I think, you know, from what I'm seeing. But it still is bad that there's best violence going on no matter what. Don't get me wrong with that. But to finish your question, if we did have to arrest both of them, Child Protective Services would take the children unless there was a grandparent nearby and the parents agreed that that person could be the guardian for the children while they were in custody. Otherwise, they end up with Child Protective Services.
And unfortunately, CPS would tell you guys that if they were here, but there'll be a little bit of gaps.
Yes, and yeah, I'll leave that out. Never mind. Go ahead. Next question.
I was just gonna ask, when you're saying the dominant aggressor, are you, what kind of things are you making that basis on? Just the physical harm that happened, or within the interviews with the children and things like that? Are you also like gathering information on it? This is like a cycle, and there's a dominant person that's doing that.
It's the whole picture.
Okay.
It's every little, I mean, when you're doing an investigation, it's every little piece, everything that you can put together. I mean, I had one where, you know, I had a female that I knew she was constantly getting abused, and I kept going to the house and trying to get her to report this, and because she was reporting it to other services, but not to law enforcement, because she was terrified of law enforcement. She was illegal, and she thought she was going to get deported, and so they came to me and asked me if I'd work with her, so I started going out to her house and talking to her, and I was a detective, and going, you know, we encourage you to report this. Nothing's going to happen bad to you. You're not going to get deported. We're not even going to look at that. And actually, we even have a U visa that we give you paperwork to keep you here legally because now you're a victim in a crime. So I'd explained that to her. So sure enough, she did, and I knew she got abused many, many times. But she was building up her confidence. So this one night, he starts abusing her. He's dragging her around the house by her hair, smacking her against the walls. And she reached up and grabbed this huge coffee cup, this big, huge glass coffee cup, and cracked his face. Split his face wide open. I mean, she had a little blood on her scalp and a couple scuffs from getting drug around and hit into the walls. His whole face is all bloody and cut open. But guess who goes to jail? He went to jail. You know, so you're looking at that whole, and just tell that story because it shows you look at the whole situation and all the history and everything you know. And I know she was just trying to defend herself. He ended up getting a nasty injury from it, but she was just trying to get away from him.
The exact same for us. It's the whole picture. Our law says primary physical aggressor, but that same phrase would be interchangeable. If somebody's defending themselves or trying to get out of it, you look at the whole picture and just decide who that dominant force is and where the real abuse is coming from and the domestic violence started with. And sometimes it's hard to tell. There's mutual abuse going on sometimes, depending on the day. So they're the most challenging, the most dangerous. I'm sure you guys have heard that already. You know, they're our most dangerous calls because there's so much passion involved. But we look at that whole scenario and then just make the best decision we can based on all the facts and circumstances that are there. And knowledge of what happened before. More likely, it's not the first time we've been to that house. That cycle of violence has built up and built up and built up to reach a point where we get called. So we're there at the precipice.
Do you ever, I assume you might, but if you make a wrong choice, and if that did happen, you're like, oh crap, totally screwed up. What happens, like, say you put the wrong person in jail and the aggressor, you know, showed up differently. And the children, if there's children in the house, are they at more risk now? Like, how does that look if there was an error? Or is your system and methods really strong that it's unlikely?
It's rare that I would see an error like that. I don't know that I have seen it in that kind of case. I haven't seen an error like that. Now, if there was, then we would unarrest them. If it's early enough in the case, we would unarrest them, or the DA would just drop the charges and there wouldn't be anything to go on.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we're getting on my list is at the district attorney's office and what happens at that level. So after we do our investigation, most of this is handled on the street. Investigations, at least for us, doesn't get involved in most of these unless there's certain circumstances, rare circumstances to the case. Then they'll get involved. So pretty much what happens that night with the deputy that's out there, that case then gets sent just straight to the district attorney's office. And the district attorney then will look it over and decide if they want to go forward with charges on it or not. And honestly, we as cops don't always agree with the district attorney. And there's been several cases that were dropped that really, really stung. You know, I really didn't want those cases dropped. So that comes back to you guys, because that goes to the victim. And then the victim's like, well, why'd they drop these cases, this case? And they're really let down. They finally, you know, maybe there was a person that was afraid to come forward, afraid to call the cops, afraid to get involved with the police. They finally made that step. And they went through all of this, and the cops got, you know, arrested him or her and took him away. And now it comes to the DA's office, and the DA's not gonna do anything, they're gonna drop the whole case. And that does happen. And there's nothing, but I need you guys to support. That's when you can support the victim still and making a change in their life and still doing the right thing, even if the person's not gonna face charges for it. We just don't have control over that. I mean, we can talk or until we're blue in the face of the district attorneys, they make that final decision, not us.
So then you have to come back again, you know, if the victim is still the victim, you get another call.
For a new case, yes.
Oh.
But that case now is done.
Oh.
The
It's
old
over.
one, it's over. So if there's a total new situation that
Street?
occurs, that case will still be written, still be there, we can still pull it and use it towards the new
It's
case.
gonna impact it.
But we would need a new incident, a new crime
Wow.
to occur before we could go forward with
So it
anything to
starts all over
resubmit.
And unfortunately, that emboldens that when those cases are dropped, that just emboldens the aggressor.
Yeah, the victim's gonna be like,
And
what's
solidifies in the victim's
And
psyche
loses
that
trust
she
in
can't
you
get out of it.
Yes.
Dang, yeah. Oh my goodness.
It's really tough.
Do you ever personally follow up with your own personal time with victims like that to just give them confidence or let them know, like, even though they're not going out, if this happens again, still, please, you know?
Oh, yeah.
We try to follow up with everybody, and that's where victim advocates and
Thank you guys, I
volunteers like
appreciate you
yourselves
guys
jump
on
in.
everything you do and going through this. It's like, I know this is one of the toughest positions for law enforcement, so thank you
They're
guys,
tough.
seriously.
Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, if the DA decides to pursue it, how long does it generally take to get into the court? Like, how big is the docket? I mean, is the caseload massive, and is this something that takes weeks, months before there's a trial?
Well, if they're in custody, they only have so much time that they have to be, at least be arraigned within 72 hours. So there's gonna be that arraignment, then it's gonna be a matter of, at that arraignment, if they're gonna be released, like if they haven't post bail, you know, if they're gonna be released, what their bail's gonna be, it's gonna be case by case. It's gonna depend on what the, you know, damages were, the injuries, you know, the history, all that stuff's gonna be brought into what that's gonna look like. And then they'll go forward with the case pretty quickly, but it's not the next day. No, I mean, it still
It's,
takes a while.
if it goes to trial, which they rarely go to trial, then it's months for sure.
True, that's true, for us too.
Yeah, a big docket.
And if it's a good attorney, or they go and spend some money on a real attorney, then it's going to be more than a few months, because they'll delay it and they'll do all the legal gambits. You know, I'm a little cynical about the system because I've seen it from the inside a lot, and everybody tries to do the best they can. And at the same time, we're watching out for the victim. The suspect still has rights and still has to be looked out for. So when I say an attorney does that, well, that's absolutely within their rights to fight their case. And so everybody's looking out for everybody. And then you have the government involved, which creates clouds and things. So we try to streamline it as much as we can, and on our level, all we can do is give them the best case and the most well-written case that we can, and then try to follow up with, I know that the deputies that work for me, my orders are for them to follow up with the DA a week after, once it's assigned to a DA, to talk to them and make a personal connection with that DA, so that when they decide if they're going to drop it or not, they know that there's actual people that are involved, and that the deputy cares about that case.
What's the percentage of suspects that actually plead guilty?
It's like 90%, or plead guilty, like,
To being a perpetrator,
in a plea?
aggressive.
I wish it was 90%.
Right? I know that most cases, it's like 90% go into plea deals.
Yes, now the plea deals, yes, because plea deals are, so, you know, say you could have a max of, 15 to life on a case, right? And then the attorneys are gonna discuss it and say, hey, if you just plead guilty to this felony, this felony, this felony, or whatever it's gonna be, then we're gonna, you have to do 5 years. Or we can go to trial, and if we convict you on going to trial, it's gonna be 15 years. So if the person's like, ooh, you got a pretty good case on me, I'm looking at either taking 5 right now, right here, and saying that I'm guilty to this, or I go and gamble with going to court and going to trial, and if I'm found guilty, I'm doing 15 years. So most people, 90% do take plea deals because of that.
So that's my next question. So let's say you've gone through that, how long do they normally spend in prison? If it's a felony, I mean, how long do they normally spend in jail?
Not that long.
No, not that long. There's a lot of, there's diversion, there's, I mean, there is a lot of different options out there to keep, there's so many different pressures from prison population, jail population, and the money that it takes to keep people in. And then, you know, a lot of society doesn't view them as violent offenders a lot of times, so they'll push them into programs, and it's very
Anger management programs.
anger management, those things.
Is assault and battery treated pretty much the same thing then? I mean, is domestic violence a higher order of punishable crime than assault and battery that's a felony, or?
Well, in Nevada, it would be the same. It's just there's some different enhancements. So it's in Nevada, it's battery, and then it's domestic related on top of it. So it's always battery, whether it's me and you fighting and it's just a battery, or if somebody's married or living together or whatever their relationship is, then it becomes domestic, and that's where it kicks in. The hold, the gun restrictions if you're committed, and all those other things. So the battery part of it, the hitting or whatever happens is the same.
Constant conviction.
And then you just add domestic to it because it's a domestic relationship. However that's defined in whatever state you're in.
It is true for California, and it's really weighs on, again, the severity of the crime. You know, I mean, it could be, for us, I mean, it could be a felony if there's a black eye. It also could be a felony if the person almost died. They got beaten almost to death. Well, you know, then we can, of course, if we get really high, then we're looking at attempted murder. And they will go on a domestic violence for attempted murder if the person got close to death, you know. So there's all these other things that come into it. It's not just this one crime. You're arrested for this one crime and that's it. Oh, well, this happened, now we can add that crime. Oh, and this crime was violated, that's another statute you can add. And then you can add this, so you just stack them all up on top of each other if it's not a, you know, if it has all those elements.
I mean, you can have, so I'll give you an example of one we had the other day. This couple was living apart, they were going through divorce, or they're separated, getting ready to go through divorce. He went over to the house drunk, entered with the intent to beat her up. We charged him with burglary. Now, when you hear burglary, you think that's a property crime. In Nevada, if you enter with the intent to commit a crime, then that's burglary. Or if the damage going in, it's home invasion, which is another level of felony. So we look at all those different things to give the DA's room to move, because they can then talk to the defense attorney or just the suspect and say, hey, we've got you on 4 felonies and a domestic violence misdemeanor battery. But if you do all these things, we'll get you with 1 felony, a diversion, and camp in Southern Nevada. They'll send them to a fire camp or something instead of prison. So there's all the negotiations that go on behind the scenes are crazy to me. Now, some good because you have to balance everything. We can't just put everybody in prison. But those type of negotiations go on. And you guys are gonna have DAs come in and talk, right?
Yeah,
so you can ask them about negotiations.
Yeah.
Don't tell them I said so.
Can I ask you a question? How do you feel about like the state level privatized prison system? Do you think that affects a lot of what happens to suspects?
We don't have any private
we don't have it
prisons
here, so
or
it's all-
jails in
everything's
Nevada.
government owned here in California. Nevada.
Well, in Nevada it is.
Nevada.
California, there's private
No,
prisons.
no,
So
we
it's-
have
it's all
state
government
prisons
now.
and then we have our jails, which is counties. So you
Yeah,
have your
right.
county
No, I'm
jails
talking
and your
prison.
state
Yeah, I know all
prisons.
the jails are. So there's no right now, no private, because that's something I always was heard and I saw as an issue. to be
No, we
able
don't
to
have
say.
any private
Okay.
at all. And actually, it about 3 years ago for the state of California, maybe a little longer, 4 or 5 years ago now, AB 109, an assembly bill came into effect where they took a lot of the prisoners that are nonviolent and started to filter them back down to the jails because they were getting overcrowded. So now our jails then were overcrowded. So now those people, even the lower offenders, are getting pushed out onto the street.
Yeah, I saw
and being
this in LA
supervised on the
County.
street now.
There was, and I grew up in LA in the 90s, and like everybody, we all were going to jail. And then it was 10% kickbacks. It didn't matter, you got 90 days, and if you just took the case, you're out in 9. No, so nobody was worrying at all.
Yeah, yeah.
It was 10%, because everything was, there was like 125% overpopulation. You know, and then even to the point where people were getting money back for having to sleep on the floor. So they were getting the money that jails were getting allocated for the prisoner. They signed a class action suit, and a bunch of people got checks back for sleeping on the floor and not having a bunk. So it was crazy for a while.
Yeah.
It's a hard issue. It's just a hard issue because when California started releasing a bunch of prisoners, our crime rate went up. And
So did ours.
Everybody's dead.
Everybody's dead.
Everybody's dead. But we always blame California, so you know. But it's easy to do. You know. So, but you know, society has to make the choice, and they did, and they said, "Hey, this is what we're willing to live
You
with."
can even see it in the police vehicles down south. A lot of the cities, you can see when there's money for the police stations or not just by their vehicles. You know, I mean, there's some like Arcadia, where I lived, was a really wealthy city, and they obviously put money into their police department. They all had like brand new cruisers every 5 years. You know, so they were on point. You know, in our police station in Monrovia was not quite so advanced to have a 20-year-old vehicle. Sometimes you see. I just feel like there was a difference in the city's allocation of funds. You know, towards. I know sheriff's use or county is different, but cities are going to have definitely a big discrepancy.
So we're still subject to the county commission and where the sheriff feels like the allocation should go.
So they still, some counties get hit, they don't get the same type of funding.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you guys go and tour the different substations and PDs? Is that part of your county? No. Yeah, because you will see that, you know, well, you had a substation, which is still there, but
Well,
you guys
we're
don't
actually
really-
reopening it.
Are you?
Yeah, becoming not self-sufficient, but yeah, that's my job is I'm assigned up there full-time now, which we didn't have that before.
Awesome.
It's a long story because now we just got hit with budget cuts and they fired my boss and
But
she's
you're
got
getting
Reno now, so. What's that?
So, but you're getting creative though,
Trying to be creative.
He's
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, thank you.
I want to go back to the bit about when the perpetrator is put in jail and they serve, from your expressions, a very minimal sentence for their crimes. If they get out, how often is there revenge crimes? Like when they get out, do they come and finish the job, or does this happen, or does their service in prison diffuse the situation at all?
I've seen that as very rare, very rare actually. We'll have indication they'll say something or you know, relatives will be scared or the victim will be scared. We'll try to put plans in place, but actually following through with it, I've only seen a few times.
And I would agree with the same. I have on a low level a lot, like, you know, violating a restraining order.
Well,
Just-
right.
They like to call just to-
Texting and calling and.
call and text and say what an awful person the other person is, and just because they've been holding up all that anger. So it's not really coming and finishing, hurting them physically that I see. I see more of the mental side. Yeah, I'm seeing them just the violation of restraining orders and stuff. We get those quite a bit where it's just, you know, just so they can cuss the person out. They want to call them or come
That's weird.
run into them to cuss them out.
And not to say that it doesn't happen. Like I said, I worked in violent crimes for a long time as a detective, and unfortunately, I was part of, I think, 12 domestic-related homicides. You know, females killing males, males killing females, and so it does happen. One was a straight-up revenge. After he was arrested for domestic violence, he went back and killed the boyfriend, stabbed him. Do you guys remember that movie Fear with Robert De Niro? He put that movie on his chest after he killed him. And kidnapped her. She ended up going all the way to Salt Lake and was able to escape. She was sexually assaulted several times on the way over. It's a horrible case. He's on. We were able to get a death penalty case on him, and he's sitting on death row still. That was 12 years ago. But he'll be there for life, more likely. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we've had them too, you know, I mean, they do happen. You know, I had one that, you know, reported a couple of times, and then he killed her, and then he killed himself. So that, you'll see that a lot too, is like the, you know, homicide, suicide.
Becca?
Oh, I was just wondering, going back a minute, if the perpetrator is verbally or like virtually harassing the victim after the fact, like after they say they have a restraining order or they've been arrested, is there a punishment for that typically with you guys?
Is there a what? I'm sorry.
Is there a punishment for that with you all? Like if someone isn't supposed to be contacting that person, and yes, so maybe they're not going to the house and physically
Any
hurting them,
contact.
but like emotionally.
Any contact,
or
however.
mentally harassing them.
Or like,
You can't go through a third person, I can't have you call her to harass her because it's still a violation.
Right, but will you guys then go, do they typically
It's
get
arrestable.
arrested for that?
Oh,
for
yeah.
that?
Yeah,
To
we-
video?
If
Okay.
they violate, we take that very seriously if they violate a TPO.
I'll bring in a
And so do the
California
judges.
and a Nevada restraining order tomorrow, and we'll look at it. Because it's interesting, all the different ways that you can ask the judge to block their movements. I mean, they cover just about everything. I mean, they do cover everything.
Yeah.
Like harass, through a person, through another party.
We've got one judge that is actually forcing people now, with technology, they can put what's called a geofence around the victim and their home, their business, and whatever. And the suspect, in order to get out of jail, has to agree to let his phone be on and the location on for this whatever program it is. And if he goes into one of those geofences, it sets off a bell at alternative sentencing.
It's like technology working on our side, finally.
And they have the GPS bracelet that can do the same thing. Now, it's hard to get that on, because it's new, so they're experimenting with it, but to me, that's a great thing, And if they cut the bracelet, they can tell, so.
exactly.
The cell phones can be pinged. I mean, there are ways to find out where someone is. Locations are on pretty much every app anyone owns, so even if you don't have something with law enforcement, you can probably find them. There's SnapMap, Facebook locations,
Yeah.
Instagram locations, so.
All right, who's next? Sorry, we're gonna go to Tucker first.
So for the California, there was recently on, I bet some of us all saw it on Truckee Tahoe People with the sister that got on and she was putting her sister's boyfriend on blast, video that her sister sent her. And the sister's in the bathroom, she's crying, he's on the outside of the door, pounding on the door. Do you want me to fucking kill your cat? Do you like making me this mad? And she's trying to get him in all sorts of trouble. He takes the sister, they went somewhere, she has no idea where. With something like that, is that enough to give to you guys and then you guys can get a warrant against that dude? So if he comes back, gets pulled over, he can get taken in for something like that, or does she have to report it?
No, anybody can report it. We're gonna go and investigate it. As far as warrants and stuff, you jumped way, way ahead.
Mhm.
We would have to go look into it, look at what we got, what crimes we have, was she in prison when she was taken? So we would have to speak to her, of course, but she doesn't have to report it. All we need is a phone call of somebody saying, hey, I need a welfare check on my sister. My sister, I think, this is what I've got. This is why I want a welfare check on her. And then we'll go look into it. We'll try to find her, see where she's at, try to locate her, and then if she disappears, of course, then there's the missing persons report, and then any agency will be looking for her and trying to find her. So it depends on where that goes and what happened. And obviously, if we find out that this guy did kidnap this girl and take off with her, yeah, we can get a warrant for his arrest. But it all depends on that investigation and what we find and what crimes we have.
I did not see that.
You didn't see
Did
that one?
they take it down?
I
Yeah,
don't
they
know.
must have taken that, because I didn't see that up on there.
You didn't?
either.
That,
Yeah, the investigations uses it a lot of the social media. We're not using it so much on patrol
Sure.
as much, because that's more the investigative side. We will here and there, don't get me wrong, if we think we can get something there, but it's not something that we're checking every day, as a
Right,
patrol
yeah.
officer,
Follow on, get you on Facebook.
People are really dumb though.
Yeah.
Give up their locations all the time on
They-
social media.
They do.
Criminals.
Social media is
Criminals are
great. No, I'm not a big social media person, and so when I was a detective for 9 years, a very similar history to yours, because you missed mine, but 9 years of detectives in CAP, and that was the thing, was like, I wanted an expert for all our social media stuff, so I could give it to an expert, because I don't even have a Facebook account. I don't do anything on social media, so when I became a detective, I'm like, I don't even know how this stuff works. Yeah. I didn't even have a smartphone. They made me take one.
I actually have a few I've been holding, but so that kind of one goes with what you were saying, and actually the dark web seems to be a tremendous source of criminal activity. Or is there efforts to dig into that? And I guess it would be more for like
bigger cities maybe, but are you familiar with the dark web?
Just specialists, you know, we have a specialist for our county, and that's the only person that really knows, you know, works with that. It's our computer forensic specialist. And so they're, you know, all up to date on all of that stuff. It's like the human trafficking and things like that. They'll get involved with that. And we have task force, and we have deputies from our agency that are part of that task force. And so that task force will then go, you know, so it's multiple agencies. So a task force is like, you know, all these cities within Placer County, and then maybe some of the neighboring counties will join in on that task force. And then all together, they go to do these special task type stuff, like human trafficking or something. And then they might work with our specialists in the computers to see what they can find online in the dark web.
Yeah.
But me personally, no. Not me.
On our level, we don't, but we have a cyber crimes unit down in Reno that works. They have the FBI, Secret Services all in the same office, and they work all those types of things. Mostly, we have an ICAC unit, which is Internet Crimes Against Children unit, that goes out, and you know, there's some you could make 1,000 cops and they'd have enough work to keep busy for 10 years. I mean, it's out of control, the cyber crimes, but you know, they're doing the best they can to keep up.
And then how much does the prison system influence your protocol, like overcrowding, or they're not going to tell you guys like don't arrest that many people, we're full, or anything like that? You guys kind of stay the course?
I've never heard that. I
Two
remember
different systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was new, I remember we had a sheriff back then that said, "Hey, slow down on the arrest." And in Washoe County, we have 70 agencies that arrest into the Washoe County Jail. So everybody took that as a challenge to overcrowd the jail. So they haven't said that since.
Yeah, and it doesn't affect us at all.
So
I mean,
no, we arrest people when we feel appropriate. And when I say we, my deputies do now. I don't want to do a lot of that.
Might be the legal system that kind of filters things differently.
in the DA's office, that might be a good question for tomorrow at the DA's office, if it influences their decisions at all. For us at our patrol level, or detectives or anything, in as far as the sheriff's offices, not at all.
Not
We
even a
have
little bit.
we have laws we gotta follow. You break the laws, we're gonna arrest you. And you know, my guys, they want to arrest. You know, I mean, it's not like they're going, I don't feel like arresting this guy, we'll let him walk. You know,
You're doing your job.
you're going to do their job. They're going to arrest them, and they're going to pick them up. We do have issues up here because of being in Tahoe. So we contract with Nevada County to jail our guys until we get a transport up from Auburn, because our jail's in Auburn. And so they come up here to Truckee to pick up our guys and take them down. Well, the Nevada County jail is it's only 2 people. They have no doctors on, they have no nurses, they have very limited staff. So if they're extremely violent or if they're on medications, they have to go down to Auburn. So if there's a snowstorm and I-80's closed, it does cause some issues for us. We still arrest them anyway. I'll call people in on overtime. I'll do whatever I have to do, but a lot of times we end up in a pickle because of that.
We have the same issue.
Where is that jail?
Nevada, our jail, the Placer County Jail in Auburn, it's right there. It's on Auburn. It's on Richardson Drive in Auburn. So if you were to take, do you know where Bell is? 49 at Bell? It's just you take, so if you're at 49 at Bell, you head, it's pretty much west, I would guess, on Bell, a little bit down to Richardson. So it's right there close to that intersection. The DWIT Center, all the Placer County kind of hub for all the law enforcement and probation and all of that's right there. Do you have a question? I'm
Isn't
sorry.
the juvenile next to the?
They're right next door. And then our juvenile holding facilities right next door to our jail.
And
Okay.
One last question.
Yeah.
Is there any feasibility to a gun control idea that the police would decrease the number of guns that they use in response?
I'm not sure.
The
how
amount of guns
understood.
that we use.
What do you mean?
Yeah, so in terms of decreasing the number of deadly weapons on the street, would it ever be feasible for the police to take the lead and decrease the number of guns that they are carrying out on the streets to where it's like 2 to 1 or I guess just wondering how that sits with you, comfortable, like, could you do your job without a gun?
Well, for us, carrying less
No.
guns?
Not safe.
No, no, absolutely not, no.
Bad guys carried guns, and once they knew we didn't carry them, they would use them against us.
Yeah, you would have no order, no law left, you know? I mean, people that were, you know?
I just know in, like, England and Japan, they don't carry guns, they
They're-
are
Too
trained
far
in
past
it.
Their population has way less guns.
Yeah.
They don't have
We're
any guns
gonna
at all.
read
Yeah, their
this
population
in
is not.
Yeah.
for me.
When you-
Can we talk about,
Yeah, let's go.
yeah, just
We'll
because
go
of
back
sake
to
of
your-
time, what does sexual assault response looks like for law enforcement in each of your counties?
I would guess it's very similar. Victim first, it depends on the amount of trauma, if it's reported right then or if it's a past tense report, they're treated different. Generally, they're past tense reports. I would say 80% of them are probably past tense. In my experience working with sexual assault, most victims don't report. Unfortunately, it's probably the most unreported crime that we have. And they're obviously the most difficult crime to prosecute and prove. So, stranger sexual assault is very low, generally. It's usually friends that take advantage of situations. So it makes it very difficult when you get into that, was it consensual or not consensual? So we do everything we can to support the victim we get obviously the same kind of investigative steps we've already described with domestic violence is the same investigative steps for everything else. It's just the level of care as far as if there's a scene we can go to and collect evidence, we'll go to the scene and collect any evidence they say, whether that scene's a car, a bedroom somewhere, no matter where it is, we'll go try to collect evidence.
Hotel room, stuff
Go,
like that.
Go interview suspects, interview any witnesses, get what we call a SART exam for the victim to try to, mend any injuries they may have, see if they need any medications based on what they may have been exposed to, those kind of things.
But how do I ask this as a question? So most often, when you're responding, you're not taking like a perpetrator in right then and there because it requires more investigation.
It definitely requires more investigation. I would say that the amount of times that a patrol officer would arrest a sexual assault suspect is almost zero. It's very rare because you're going to have detectives come out. For our department, I'm going to say for you guys, our detectives are going to come out. They're going to try to make formal interviews, get, all formalize everything we can so that case is as solid as possible.
Yeah, for the sexual assault cases that I've helped with like victims, it's really based off of what evidence is collected and if the victim is like willing to go through prosecution and stand up there on the stand and things like that. And that's why it's important for victim advocates to, like Sage said, encourage people to, report and encourage them to follow through with the system. Because if we end up wanting prosecution.
Well, and also being honest with them.
Yeah.
They are going to be, the biggest thing I have a problem with the system is that we re-victimize victims over and over again because they have to tell their story over and over. Now, we're getting better with forensic interviews and child advocacy centers, CAC centers. Those, and California's had those for a long time. Nevada, we just got one 4 years ago. We were way behind the times on forensic interviews for children. I was doing them before as a detective, and I went to school for it. I learned how to do it. But now we have a professional that's all they do because I wasn't just I was multidisciplined in detectives, which isn't the best way to be when it comes to kids or even sexual assault victims. So now when we do those interviews, we'll have a DA will come out and watch if it's a sexual assault victim, an adult, the DA will come out and watch. We'll have if there's kids involved in the house, CPS will watch. We'll have the victim advocate there to watch through a camera. We'll have a big screen TV, and this is just a videotaped interview. So that way, the victim doesn't have to go and tell the patrolman, and then tell the detective, and then tell the DA, and then tell CPS, and then. But you do have to be honest with them. They are going to have to sit up in court and face their accuser because that's the way our system is designed, and they're going to have to tell that story again. And it is I haven't been in that position, but I've seen many of my victims in that position. It's the worst thing I've ever experienced, and that's just being with them and not being them.
Is there a distinction between sexual assault and rape? Because is there, I mean, what about attempted rape? Isn't attempted rape?
Well,
I mean,
rape is-
what would attempted rape then be? Is that battery or?
Well, sexual assault could be sexual in nature, not a rape. A rape
Right,
is
that's-
actual intercourse. So it's gonna
Right.
have to, rape for us, you know, our charge for rape is actual intercourse. And sexual assault could be not the intercourse, but
Right.
still sexually assaulted, touching, you know, foreign
Right.
objects,
That's
whatever,
right, yeah,
you
that's what I
know.
was wondering.
Ours is
Right.
different. We do not have rape as far as, ours is sexual assault. And it's
Period.
any penetration, however slight, is how it's defined. We have battery with intent to commit sexual assault is what we would
Yeah.
charge.
Yeah.
So if they tried or they, you know,
That's what I was wondering.
Right.
Yeah.
so it's different vernacular, I guess, but same at the end.
Yeah, same in general. So, and just similar to like when we're called out on a sexual assault, our deputies on the street aren't gonna really do a whole lot on it. They're pretty much just gonna do a face page on it, and we're gonna call detectives. And detectives are gonna come out because this is it's such an in-depth investigation. It's more than patrol can do, because we're available to handle, you know, emergencies and be out available to respond to those emergencies. And this is gonna tie somebody up for a while with this victim. Not only collecting evidence and all of that, but the SART exams. And I wanted to go back to those exams. We actually use the same as you. I actually did the MOU so that we could, because in the past, we used to have to go all the way down to Roseville. And so, could you imagine if you were a victim of a sexual assault and I told you you're not gonna be able to pee, chew, eat, drink, anything for an hour and a half drive to 2 hours to go down to Roseville so you can get an exam. So it was a huge problem. So now we're going over to Washoe County, which is great. So we go down to Reno to their same center, which I think you have
Yeah.
Debbie coming in.
They're supposed to be here Thursday, which is inevitably probably a snow day, and so you guys may not get the full.
But
Hopefully.
we do schedule walkthroughs through the building down there every like year or so for new volunteers on helpline and new staff members, so they know the lay of the land when they show up there. Yeah.
And I didn't know you guys use that, so that's
Yeah.
great. Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
really cool building, and like you were talking about, the one room with everybody watching
Yeah.
is,
And they built that. I only got to use that place for like 8 months, and then I promoted out of detective. So I was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
But it was a good fight. It was a good fight to get it because it's a great center.
It is awesome.
Oh, no, you're fine. I had a question. For law enforcement, what is your guys' take on rape culture, or the view that people have that there is a rape culture? Do you guys think there is an epidemic, as a lot of people would say there is when it comes to sexual assault?
I don't see that, you know, in my 18 years, it's kind of stayed the same. I don't think that it's any worse or better, you know. I would love to say it was better, but I don't think it's
Right.
really better. I think it seems to be for, you know, the amount of populace you have, your percentages are kind of staying about the same, in my experience.
I would say the same thing.
But going back, before we answer more questions, I wanted to finish what I was saying, because that sexual assault part, it's really hard sometimes to get these gals to go for these exams, which I understand. They've already been victimized, and now they're gonna go meet with a nurse or a doctor. They're very, you know, they're gonna be great. This is what they do, but still, they're gonna have to get swabs from their body. They're gonna have to deal with all this, you know, talking about everything that happened, and then take their clothes off, and we're gonna collect their clothes, and we're gonna collect, you know, stuff off of everything off of them. It's invasive. It is invasive, and I'm honest with them that it's what it's gonna be. But then when they hear that, they don't want to go. But it's really hard to make a case without that evidence, and it's really crucial that they do go. And so I love it when you guys see that, know that, and realize that. So when you get called out there as an advocate with my victim, that you really encourage them to go forward with that evidence. Because if we don't get the evidence, even if we know in our hearts it happened and this guy's guilty of it, what we know in our hearts doesn't make any difference in the court. We have to have evidence. So.
Convincing a jury, really quick. If we don't have that hard evidence, and even when we do have that hard evidence and they take it to a trial, it's really, really hard. Juries can be made to judge the victim, and that's what they do. They go after the victim. about the decisions they made, about, because it's, honestly, it's, sexual assault and rape is very rarely the person that jumps out of the bushes and grabs you and rapes you. It's usually somebody that you meet that night, or a friend, or somebody that you already know or have some kind of relationship with. So trying to, if you were out partying one night and then something happens, then the defense attorney is going to bring those people in and say, wasn't she drunk? Was she this? Was she that? And it makes it for a really hard trial without evidence.
You check
So-
the blood alcohol with the evidence that you have them?
From our victim? No.
She said yes.
Wait, what was your question?
Yes, they will,
Check
they'll,
blood alcohol.
sometimes, they'll collect for us, they collect, down in our center, they'll collect some blood or,
Well, they will
to
collect
make
that
sure,
blood, yeah.
to make sure they didn't have, because a lot of times they think they've been drugged, they'll be like, yeah, I was out
That's true.
drinking,
Yeah,
I
that's
had like 3 drinks, but 3 drinks wouldn't make me unconscious, and I was unconscious, I don't remember a thing, I blacked out. And so then we'll check to see if they were slipped something else, some other drug was put in their drink or something like that.
That's absolutely true. I misunderstood what you were asking.
And you have to remember, those drugs are only usually up to 8 hours, so if you're not reporting that pretty quickly, chances are there won't be a trace anyways. If you wait 2 days, you're gonna have nothing in your system.
Do you see much of the it's date rape drug? Is that something that's prevalent? And is that still something that's even,
Like Rufinol?
yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, when Debbie comes in, she'll talk about the different drugs that they test for, and she'll say that, alcohol is usually like the #1 thing that's used for that. And in combination, I mean, they've seen crazy combinations at that center down there of what, like, can't remember what she said, like Visine or something one time that she's seen that like has a weird effect if somebody's taking like Benadryl as well, it can knock people out. People are getting creative when they can't get their hands on other stuff like that.
Or they think it'll hide it, They'll be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I didn't drug them. Takes Benadryl, I don't know, but you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right, and to finish it off, I have 2 questions for you. Might be the hardest question. What is the most challenging part of your job? So for both of you, what is the most challenging part of your job, and what is the most rewarding part of your job? Whoever wants to go first.
Okay. Well, the most demanding part of the job is dealing with victims when sometimes you can't help them because we get there and we can't prevent it. It's already happened. I can tell you that the worst part of my career was when I was in homicide. I got in there because I thought it'd be really cool to sound like a homicide cop until I got the job. And then you realize that no, it's actually the worst job ever because all you're doing is trying to bring closure to a family. They've already been victimized to the point, when I've had to tell, I've given, I don't know how many death notifications are the worst. They're the worst. We still do them in patrol all the time, We have, a lot of people that move to Incline from the East Coast and their son will die or their daughter will die or their parent will die, and we do a notification. And those are the toughest to me, is watching lives crumble so quickly like that. And, on the rewarding side, on the flip side of that is, it's one of the things I'm most proud of in my career that I would say that probably 80% of the families of my victims I get Christmas cards from, and they call me all the time and ask me how I'm doing. Because every case you do, and I'm sure you can attest to this, you carry a little bit of that case with you, and over 18 or 20 years, you're carrying a lot of weight. So to know that I made a difference, at least in their lives, and made that hard part of their lives a little bit easier by giving them some closure and being a person instead of a machine that they expect. I think a lot of people expect when we show up in this uniform that we're not feeling and that we don't care. So when you get down on their level, like with kids, you talk to kids on their level. I get down and sit with kids all the time. I will hug a grieving widow. I'll hug, I have a man that I go to lunch with every other week. His name's Joe Linsock. He watched his wife get shot in the face right in front of him.
Oh my God.
And her best friend was tortured and killed the day before, and they were neighbors. They happened to show up when the guy was leaving. And he still wants to go to lunch with me every 2 weeks, even though I have to remind him of how bad that day was. But he thanks me every time and gives me a big hug and says, thank you for being a person. Thanks for hugging me that day. Thank you for being honest with him, and that's what you guys, when you're dealing with victims, you have to be honest, and the truth does hurt sometimes.
Sure, yes.
Oh.
All right, Sage.
I've been doing this for how long?
She did say yes.
I'm walking out. No, and I agree with the notifications. The other thing is those cases where somebody did something really bad to somebody, like I've had some sexual assault cases where the guy walks. And you sit there and you spend 6 months with this, this victim and this family and supporting them and getting evidence and working the case and trying to make it happen, and then it goes to trial, and usually it's a jury. I hate to say it, but juries, I don't know what it is. They just, for some reason, see something, they don't believe something or what, I don't know what it is, but I've seen a lot of juries, and I've seen it get worse, I think, as my career's gone on. They used to convict more on these cases, I think, when I was younger in my career than I'm seeing now. And I think it's just a change in the type of people, just the personality of our whole community. So that breaks my heart, and especially, to watch the victim's face up there, when they find out that the person's going to get away with everything they did. That, to me, is right up there with notifications in a totally different way. But notifications are also, of course, my least favorite as well. It's just not, it's not fun. And then with the cases for me, as far as the reward, the best stuff was when I was a detective and I did a lot of molest cases. And so I specialized for a while with the children. And getting these guys put away for 20, 30 years, oh my gosh. I'm like, hey, that guy's gonna be in for the rest of his life. Yes, at least, there's something. I did something with all that time and effort. And the same thing, I have a young girl, another Hispanic illegal that came to me, was afraid to come forward, and she had an uncle who was threatening her little chihuahua by the neck and making her watch porn and then perform all the stuff on the porn to him, or he was going to break her dog's neck. And he did this, this went on for months, and she didn't want to report it because she was afraid because her whole family's illegal and they're all going to get deported if she tells the cops. So it was another one that I'm in with the community, and people trust me in my community, so they came to me with this and said, Sage, you need to do something. And I was like, no problem, we'll got this, we'll do something. So we did, and that little girl now wants to be a cop. And she comes and sees me all the time, and you got any more stickers? You get that little badge, And so I think she's gonna do really well in her future, so that was a huge reward. Not as good as his.
No,
I think it was 10 times better.
You came last time, didn't you?
Yeah.
Over in Incline
I was in
Village.
Incline.
Josh.
Yeah.
There wasn't this many people.
No, there wasn't.
I was like, oh,
There's
there's only 2.
I know, I forgot to warn you guys, much better class than last week.
Yeah,
That's
I would've
okay.
made more copies.
It's all
All
good.
right, we're gonna do like couple last questions, then we're gonna let them go.
I have a quick question. Like for example, when you how do you report? Cause I seen a guy that in Kings Beach that's always like with little girls, and it's just really weird because he's only with little girls. So like, I don't know if he like. Every time I go through that street, he's always there with those little girls, and I don't know if he's doing something wrong to them but it's just suspicious to me to see them with.
You could always call us to come and check. We can send a patrol car over to meet with him, find out where the kids are from, what's going on, are they family, and he just watches the kids for the family, or, you can call us and we'll come ask.
Family, but it's just weird that, it's just like a little apartment complex thing, but that guy's always just with those little girls, They're probably like, I don't know, 7, 8-year-olds, but it's always that same guy like laughing with them, and I'm like, that's not right, like.
You should report it.
Yeah, if you have.
But like,
how do you-
what
you have a
do you do,
feeling,
like,
do it.
call 911 or.
Call the
Yeah,
police station.
you can call our regular, I put my cards out, and I don't know if we ran out of those too, I wasn't expecting so many people, but,
Yeah, I brought some cards.
but I can also write down, if you didn't get a card, I can write down my number or the number for the office. So we have an emergency number, so of course you can call 911, but we have a non-emergency number too, which will put you right to dispatch.
That's right.
And then you tell dispatch what you've got, and they'll send out a deputy, and then you tell the deputy what's going on, give them all the details, and then the deputy will decide what's the best way to investigate it.
Yeah, cause like to me, it's not right. Who does that? Like, obviously, if it's an uncle, like maybe, but not all the time, like, you know, when the little girls are just running around and he's just there sitting, like watching them, it's kind of like.
Go with your gut feeling.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
my
Go
gut
with your
feeling
gut
is like,
it's
not right, yeah.
And make
he's
yourself
like a pervert or something,
You
you
should-
know?
It's
Like-
better,
You
better
should
to
always
say
go
it
with your
than
gut.
sorry. I mean,
I actually just had this talk with all my guys in briefing, that if they see something's not right, trust your instinct. You can always say, have a good day if it's not right, but most of the time your instinct's right. You don't have to be a cop to have a gut feeling. So if you have a gut feeling, call them. Let the cops go and talk to them and ask them about it.
Because it's been a couple times, and last time I was just like, oh, when they come, like, I'm gonna ask them, like, oh, what do you do? Like, do you just call 911? Because it's not really an emergency. But I was just like, do we call 911 or how do, but I mean.
We have a non-emergency number I can write down for you at the end of
She's
class.
writing it right now.
And so, oh, you're writing it up there? Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. There's a lot of people out there that are going to need the help.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Can I ask one last question? It was a-
Sure. Danny wanted this was the last question of the class.
Well, I was trying to ask you when we're on the point, and just never, I don't know, maybe I've been talking so much, you guys want me to shut up, I don't know. But when you mentioned a homicide, domestic, and you've seen a few in your career, like, how often is it the victim that kills the perpetrator? Like, does that happen, like, where they just finally break and don't know any other way out, and they commit homicide? Have you seen that, or is that something that's common?
I've seen that. It's
And
not
then what about
common.
the judge, like, do they get, like, do the judge and the DA and people, I mean, is it like, you know, do they get that, is that considered in their prosecution, or are they just gonna get 25 life or whatever the max is for like a homicide?
Everything's considered.
Okay.
Everything's always considered. There's a lot of latitude when it comes to sentencing and those types of things.
As far as at the patrol level, we're gonna have, if it's a homicide, it's a
You
homicide.
got it,
you know.
of course,
If-
you have to, yeah.
Well,
I
she's
know
gonna
they're
get arrested if she's sitting there with a smoking gun,
And
yeah.
probably do some time too, but, you know, I mean, still, she freed herself, and it's like, there's like self-defense at the point, you know, and you don't have other options. And also, thank you guys as well for, like, when you mentioned not being robotic or mechanical and dealing with people when hugging. I've had an officer before literally back away from me when I tried to give him a hug for doing, you know, for doing such a great job. And like, don't try to touch me, you know, like, wow, you know, it's like, so and when you guys first were speaking, both of you, I sensed from you humanness, and I appreciate that compassion, and you guys are people. Thank you again for wearing the uniform. I know you get judged and biased a lot all the time, I'm sure, so I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's take a 5-minute break to get some water. Okay, we'll come back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I really enjoy that they can come in and talk. They're very open to community engagement and reaching out to the community, and I think that's what benefits us as a small town up here, that we really have law enforcement officers who are engaged. We have their supervisors that are engaged and are willing to come to things like that where you would possibly see in bigger cities, they don't have enough time to make these kind of commitments. So I think it's awesome that you guys get to ask your questions. I just wanted to go over a few things that involve law enforcement and advocates or volunteers at Tahoe Safe Alliance. If you, that involves them both. So we have, this first one is a DVERT, what we call DVERT. It stands for Domestic Violence Emergency Response Team, but you don't need to know that. And it only is a protocol that we have created with Placer County, which was Sages County. So that's Kings Beach, Tahoe, Tahoe City, Squaw, that kind of area. And some of Truckee, just depending on how the county lines sit out. So a DVERT is for when police respond, and we have this protocol on how the police connect the victims to services. So I kind of made out the steps to know. In Placer County, a call is made to 911, the police respond, they either arrest or don't arrest, and then contact is made with the victim. The officer, due to this protocol that we've created, has to provide the victim with a Tahoe Safe Alliance contact card. We call them safety cards. It gives a short synopsis of what our services are that we offer. It also gives all of our office numbers and our helpline numbers, and they empower them to reach out. Also, the officer, after meeting with the victim, if the victim wants to call Tahoe Safe Alliance right then and there, they'll do that and facilitate a phone call to our helpline. Or if they don't want to do it right then and there, an officer will later call our helpline and provide the person, whether that's a volunteer or a staff member on the helpline, with victim information. And the situation that happened, and mostly they provide it with the contact information just in case. This is if they do call our helpline, we know who we're talking to, we know what kind of situation they just came out of, and what services they might be able to provide. So this is a really cool protocol that we have. Washoe County, we don't have like a set in stone protocol, but they obviously refer to Tahoe Safe Alliance, and same for Nevada County. But this is for every domestic violence call that Placer County responds to, which is super cool.
Very cool.
And hopefully we can get all counties. And then kind of switching over to sexual assault. I know that we have it scheduled for Thursday, but it's probably going to be another snow day. It says 100% of snow on Thursday for the SART exam nurse to come in. So I wanted to give you a little lowdown because they did talk about SART today of what that stands for. So SART stands for Sexual Assault Response Team. Can you guys see that? And this is a team of different agencies coming together to make sure that this sexual assault survivor is provided with proper support and is going through the system like they should, and nothing should be missed. That's why they've created these SART teams. In different counties throughout wherever you are, sometimes they have them. And then, so I'm gonna skip back to this. So over here, you'll get a phone call if you're on the helpline or in the office. An officer or a victim will call the helpline after being sexually assaulted and request for an exam. So that's either the officer has already made contact with the victim and told them about what the exam is needed for, and they say, yep, I want an exam. Or a victim calls and says, I've just been recently sexually assaulted, I want an exam done. And so it can kind of come in two different ways, but there has to be a request for an exam. It's not just a given. It's that person's option whether they want a sexual assault forensic exam done on them. Another thing that they can do is they can do Jane Doe reporting exams. And these are exams for people who have been sexually assaulted but don't want to do prosecution at the current moment, but would like for evidence to be collected just in case down the road they decide they do want to go forward with it. And so they don't take any identifying information, they just leave it up to a case number. When they do everything of the evidentiary exam, and given time, if they come around and they say, you know what, I want to move forward with that, at least that evidence is collected in a timely manner, and they have good evidence that they can pull out and use for prosecution. Kristen?
So the victim doesn't need to call law enforcement before they call the SART team, or they do?
Right. So yeah, it can come in two ways.
So, like, just say a victim calls the helpline and is like, I want to start, that's totally fine, you don't have to.
That's totally fine, you don't have to contact law enforcement. What you will do is that person, and we'll do this with whoever wants to do the helpline, you will contact the center and talk about Jane Doe reporting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes when someone bypasses law enforcement, the Child Advocacy Center, sometimes it's easier for them when law enforcement's not involved in that piece.
Sure, I mean, everybody has different parts to play in the SART review team and are making sure that, you know, prosecution gets forward and things like that. I will say, Jane Doe reporting exams relieve pressure of having to talk to a ton of people at the current moment of what was going on. Jess?
Just want to share my story really
Sure.
quick. So when I was going to school, I I was blacked out and woke up to suspicion that I was assaulted. And I went in to the clinic and went through all the stuff. And like I said, it is very traumatic. But I kind of did the Jane Doe thing because they asked if I wanted to report him, which I didn't want to report him. But I also had the option of having them putting his name in the school newspaper.
Wow.
And I said no.
As if they were reporting the crime in the school newspaper and.
I guess it was a blotter, like a blotter type
Okay.
thing. But maybe it was, I think that was if I did report it.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Maybe.
They kind of wanted to put him on blast, I guess.
For other victims to
Right.
beware.
That doesn't sound very motivating.
Yeah, no, it was strange. I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, like Josh was saying, like the system's not very good at keeping the victim feeling safe.
Right.
So
We're working at it though, I will.
that's why people like Tahoe Safe exist.
Right.
So.
And I will say that all these different systems, when you're talking about law enforcement, when you're talking about START exams and things like that, the people in it mean well, more than likely. They mean well, you know, it's just the way systems are set up and the way laws are set up and the ways that prosecution for sexual assault and things like that are set up where it fails. And that's why you need, you know, legislation pressure and things like that to make the laws better so they can support victims instead of harm them. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's that option. And a lot of people don't know about that option, so that's why I read it up here, because some people are not told.
Yeah, so tell your victims.
So yeah, definitely. Friends, family, somebody you're on the helpline with, let them know if they are saying, I think I was sexually assaulted or I was sexually assaulted, like, what do I do next? Because you don't learn those kind of things. You can tell them that you can choose whether to call 911 and report, or we can still get an exam done without you reporting. And you would be technically reporting as a Jane Doe, which would leave your identifying information confidential.
What do the majority of people choose? Or is it really varied?
Let's see. I would say most of the time they don't know about this and they've already called the police, and a report has been made, but then they don't want to go further with prosecution where this might have helped them, where they could have made that decision on their own later on.
And the police aren't allowed to give them that option.
Once they make a report, the police are gonna say,
The
I
police
want
would
to
much
report.
rather have their information than anonymous, and if they're talking
Right,
to
I
them,
mean, because
they're gonna ask.
law enforcement is about protecting the community and things like that, so if somebody's calling not knowing that they have this option, a report has already been made. And then there's really no backtracking once you give that information.
Is this part of the information when TSA goes into schools, are the students aware of this?
Yes, so high school age, when they start talking about sexual assault, they'll talk about different reporting options and contacting Tahoe Safe Alliance. Now, they won't go into this full thing because it might overwhelm students. They ask them to call the helpline, and that's where advocates and volunteers have knowledge of this kind of stuff. But yeah, they definitely do talk about Jane Doe reporting.
At what age do you choose them?
I'm not exactly sure. I can ask prevention. I do know it's probably high school. I'm not exactly sure if they get into middle school yet.
I have a high schooler.
Yeah, you could.
I'm gonna ask if you
Yeah.
know Jane Doe, she's quite the advocate.
Ask them about sexual assault. So, okay. So you give them these options. They request for an exam. That most often law enforcement does not provide transportation down to for the victim down there. That's where we come in. It happens because of different reasons. I would say mostly because understaffing and a little bit of officers covering large areas, and they need to go and get certain things done, and the exam takes a little bit longer. So anyways, they'll call us, or the victim will call us. We have a response time of 15 minutes. So we always have a staff member that's paid to be on call every week That person, if you're a volunteer on the helpline, you'll call them, you'll say, hey, go respond. That person will respond. They will connect with the victim in a safe spot, obviously. And they will provide transportation to and from the exam down to Reno. And they will provide support, emotional, and that also may, depending on the age of the victim, might be support to the family too. You might have family members that come with children who've just been sexually assaulted and need that support too. And then also they will connect them with emergency services, whether that's motels for the night, if they have nowhere to go because they got sexually assaulted where they were staying, or food vouchers, or anything under the sun that we can ask for, that we can connect with them. We also provide what we call SART bags, which are bags with a change of clothing. You would be surprised, a lot of people go to these exams and they leave in these like really paper kind of clothing. With good clothing, toothbrush, stuff like that to kind of get their hygiene back because they had to go a certain amount of time without doing that stuff.
How long does it take to go through the process?
Through the process
Yeah,
of all of this, I would say 4 to 6 hours. Yeah, so you're looking at an all day kind of thing.
So this person
Or
is
middle of the
drained
night.
and then you go
Very
through
drained.
all of that.
Most often when you get to the point where the exam is done, the person's like, I just want to go home and I want to take a nap, or I want to go to my mom's house or something like that. They don't want to talk, they're just like, I'm done for, you know?
It's pretty rough.
So that's that. Now, we hear a lot of people who go, when you get sexually assaulted, they don't teach you what to do, so you go to the hospital. And we are preaching for them not to go to the hospital because the hospital up here does not have SART certified nurses that know how to collect evidence and know how to connect you and provide you with support. So it's kind of like a myth. You can go to the hospital and hopefully they'll refer you to the appropriate place, but that does not always happen.
So do you need to, like, if it's in California, go down to Auburn? Because, I mean, you don't want to go to Reno if you're a California resident.
So, like Sage said, in MOU, they have Nevada County and Placer County, we have agreements, which is very rare because it's across state lines. And I have agreements that instead of taking a sexual assault survivor all the way down to Roseville, we just take them over to Reno because of the rural area we are in, which is great. Very rare though because you're talking about payment, right? Somebody eventually has to pay for these exams, and that gets a little confusing when you're crossing like state fundings. But that moves us on to the next question. Number 3, who pays for the SART? I'm sorry.
So the 3 things that a person.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
So what's the first one of the, there's
So
more.
you guys don't know this, but this comes with the exam, and we're going over this because you won't be able to see the SART presentation.
Don't shower.
Don't shower. We say don't shower because most sexual assault evidence is left on the body, and with a quick shower, you'll lose it. Now that's body fluids, you're talking kissing, you're talking sneezing, touching, things like that. You would be amazed at the kind of stuff that they can swab for and they can get hits on in certain systems. So no shower, no drinking or eating, no brushing your teeth.
Don't change your clothes.
Don't change your clothes, but if you do change your clothes, put them in a paper bag. I guess plastic wears off some of different fluids on there, paper bag does not.
Well, and if Debbie came in, she'd tell you like law enforcement will often want the victim to take their clothes off. Whereas if they go to the center first, Debbie will have them keep their clothes on until they take their clothes.
Right.
Because sometimes law enforcement will take the clothes and then it'll get transferred to the center and then they won't get the evidence collected that they needed to.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just keep your clothes on and that's when law enforcement sometimes.
Shower,
goes back
drinking,
and forth.
eating.
I can't drink or eat.
So drink or eat depends on if you digested any fluids or anything during the sexual assault. All around your mouth they swab.
And if you're drinking, you'll pee and maybe
Or you could
Yes.
rinse it out of your mouth.
Yeah. Now, a thing to remember with this, because we are victim-centered, is these are suggestions. These are not, you can't do this. These are suggestions I would suggest for the sake of the evidence collection exam, which is SART exam is, they're there to collect evidence based off of body fluids, tears inside, things like that, markings on outside. These are suggestions that you'll make to somebody. If they gotta pee, they gotta pee.
Yeah, you by no means.
It
tell
is
someone
what it
to
is,
have
you
to
know?
justify it because they now have to.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, so they gotta pee, they brush their teeth, it's okay.
Isn't there 6 things?
There's a couple, I think you only need to know 3. I can't remember, like, don't wash your hair.
Oh, yeah. Don't.
Yeah, I would think
Well,
that.
no
Shower.
But I think
Yeah.
there's 6 on the exam, and I don't know what the 6th one
And if you're being raped, scratch the shit out of them.
Yes.
Get
Right, do anything you
On your
can.
fingernails.
Oh.
Yeah, so the exam is really cool from like an evidence collection point, not so much for the victim's point because it's very, very intrusive. But a basic exam, you know, you're gonna go in there. SART nurses their certificates, they're trained on to not only be supported, but to collect as much evidence as they can. So they're looking under fingernails, they're looking at necks, behind the ear, on the breast, you know, on the stomach, in the genital areas. Then they have different machines inside them to look at ruptures and tears and things like that happen from penetration that they could potentially be using in court. And it takes a long time. Yeah.
You know, any people start on the process and then just shut down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And that's okay.
So uncomfortable.
It is. That happens a lot, you know, and they'll have the nurse or the advocate encourage them to go forward, but if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it, and
Can
it's
they
their
be brought
body.
back into it with the right support or?
That's why we like to have an advocate there outside of just the victim and the nurse there, because they can, it's a friend, it's somebody that's supportive, they can explain to them what is gonna happen before they actually get to the place, which might be more comforting, other than going in there and having somebody poke and prod at you. So it does happen.
And Debbie often says that people come to the center, they'll be with an advocate in Child Safe, they'll bring a friend, whoever it is. But when they do the examination, Debbie doesn't like having anyone back there but her and the victim.
So you can get as fast as possible.
Yeah,
Well, and so she can treat the victim with as much privacy as possible without the outside emotion or influence that a third party could bring. Like if your mom is there
Yeah.
listening to you recount, she's gonna become emotional. If you, so sometimes Debbie just likes it to be her and the
Yeah.
victim.
Yeah, it's kind of set up like a room, like the room you walk into. Imagine this square kind of door, and there's like this wall here, and this is a table, and this is like the chair that they sit on. And usually you sit around here and answer questions with the nurse, you and the victim, and then the nurse will go over here, and you'll sit behind this wall, so for privacy reasons. But you'll still like be there, but you will always ask like, hey, is it okay if I stay here, you know? Because it's their decision, it's their body that's being poked and prodded on, so. And then number 3, who pays for a SART? Any guesses?
The victim.
I think it should be the county or state where it comes from, when the person's paying taxes.
There you go. Spot on. It is it's the sheriff's office, which ends up being the tax of the county that people pay. So where the crime occurred, the sheriff's office where the crime occurred pays for the exam.
And that is something you guys should memorize because
Now-
people get into situations and they don't know that.
Right. Now, if you go to a hospital for sexual assault, they're going to charge you. That's why this response is so important to know, because this automatically lets police know that they have to pay for it, even if it's Jane Doe reporting.
And that can also steer people away if they think they have to pay for this elaborate exam, transportation, and then come out on the other side of having been raped still. It's just kind of really depressing.
Are you guys trying to work on these programs for that, to get funding for victims where they don't even need to go to the county, like where you can take them to a hospital? I mean, is that?
Condom tax.
Well, different counties are working on hiring, like I know I sit on a review team for sexual assaults for Placer County down in Roseville, and different hospitals down there actually have SART nurses in the hospital working. But because of the area we're at, Reno doesn't have them. I don't think Reno has them in that hospital. They just refer out to this place, and this place has 24-hour nurses on call.
There should be like a state, you know what I mean, fund that each county gets allocated from the state.
Now there is. There's
Yeah.
stuff like VAWA, Victims Against, or Violence Against Women Act, things like that, that specifically say that victims cannot pay for their own sexual
there's a
assault
way that-
exams.
Cool.
They can fight, like if you go into a
But you have to know the right steps to get
It's
an
always
exam.
knowing this system.
Right.
Exactly.
If you go to the hospital, they're looking for injuries to treat, not for evidence
exam.
collection, and they're gonna charge you for an emergency room visit, not a sexual assault exam.
I wonder if it's sure.
So it's all about in the wording.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a couple people who have done that and then are trying to retract that because the hospital should know that it was a sexual assault victim because they said they were, and that they should refer them to a place that has a sane nurse.
And in a small town, think that there's not as many people, so you get enough people who know, they can stop people from getting that bill.
And so
Bigger
as
cities.
long as we report to them, like to the hospital, that this is a
Correct.
sexual assault, they're gonna go through the process already of getting the paperwork in line for them to get the funding without having to pay out of their pocket.
Not at the hospital though.
If they have a SART
Oh,
nurse,
if
they
they
will
have a
though.
start.
But we don't
SART,
pay.
yes, SART will
Correct.
take care of it.
Right.
There won't be any financial.
They just need
consequences.
to, it
There
just has to
isn't
be
Truckee.
pointed out that it's sexual
There is not a
assault,
start nurse in
not
Truckee.
just injury.
Right, but if you go into the ER here, they're still gonna do all the payment information that you would if you were
They're
coming
gonna
with a
bill
black
you.
eye. And so that's why someone needs to say no, it's a sexual assault and like verbally have someone confirm it. So then later on, when you get that bill, you can say, no, I told them this was sexual assault, which mandates that I don't have
I
to
would
pay
just
for
say
it.
don't go to the hospital if you've been sexually assaulted, unless you're bleeding out or something
Right.
like
Right,
that.
life-threatening.
Call Tahoe Safe Alliance and we'll guide you the right way.
And if we
Yeah.
have road closure, which we just had last weekend.
Yep.
And you are a victim, say you're a victim just a few days ago, and you can't get out of town.
Yeah.
Did you
What
guys have
happens
any
then?
issues
So-
on the helpline
No.
with that?
What?
In the past few days, did you have anything like that happen where someone couldn't get through? 'cause
Not in
of-
the past few days, but it has come up where that does happen, and what that just does is it delays the exam,
Right.
which means they're gonna
Oh,
eat,
that's
drink, and all
gonna
that
be
kind of
rough.
stuff. They're probably gonna be
Less
asked not to
evidence.
take a shower.
Yeah.
Exams can happen, I can't remember what Desi's presentation is, up to 5 days after the actual assault. And then after that, they usually don't do it because your body just regenerates so much of your fluids that everything's pretty much gone.
Yeah, and
Um,
Debbie says even by like the 5th day, it's gonna be difficult.
But
You still may
they-
have
they
residue,
put-
but.
They put those limits on it, and they will do 5th day kind of stuff, you know? I mean, to get a hit, so what happens is they take the stuff, they put the evidence different in what I call hit in different systems that have been collected of people in jail and things like that, previous crimes, and see if anything hits in there, and if it doesn't, once they find the perpetrator, they'll do that and match up. So they match together and they can prove that to the court that yes, he or she engaged in this and there was tears and things like that. And that kind of stuff is what is presented at court to prove sexual assault.
And it's quite fascinating with the exam on how much information your body tells you. Tells someone
Yeah.
who has the correct information to look for those signs. So they can tell what what happened sexually, if it was full penetration, like she can fully figure out what actually happened if she has enough evidence on the body. So that's why it's so important. And although it's like not a fun experience at all, it's very important.
Is she the only person?
She's one of, she said.
They're training a
3
couple
here.
more.
Yeah, there was, she said they lost a few nurses, and so there was like 2 of them for a while.
They don't get paid the best.
Really?
Yeah,
They're
but
contractors technically with the county.
they do what they gotta do.
I was gonna ask, let's say you have all this evidence and there's semen tears or whatever, have you seen cases that they have not like prosecuted?
From the cases that I've responded to, it's been victim won't call DAs back because they don't want to prosecute the person anymore. which is okay. Everybody makes those kind of decisions. They don't get enough evidence to go forward, obviously, and what they were saying with the jury, rape culture plays a huge deal when it comes to juries because they start thinking, well, was she drinking and what was she wearing, and that all results in rape culture, is why it's hard to convince 12 people that this was done onto you and you didn't bring it on yourself.
Even though she has
Even
affairs, though?
yes.
Yeah, I think one of the DAs has a really good example of that too, where they had like enough evidence, they had the forensic team, you know, speak in court. I think Debbie talks about a case where she spoke in court and the jury did not send the guy away. So it absolutely happens.
And we can, you can bring that question up. That's a good question to bring tomorrow when the DAs are here, because those are the ones that have seen all the evidence
Tell
and
me
seen
why
it
you're
dropped.
not.
Yeah. No, let me tell you
The
something.
DAs go into
I just want to
detail.
give you a preface. I didn't preface this class, but the questions that you're going to ask them are obviously related to domestic violence and sexual assault. And let me tell you, I know that the officers share some frustration, but these DAs want to get bad people just as bad as the officers do. It's just because the way the legal system is set up, if they have any doubt in their mind that it's not going to, it's just a waste. It really is, instead of putting somebody through re-victimization and then, you know, the jury says no. You know, so they try their hardest. And they're great women. They really are, the two that are gonna come tomorrow, right, Maria and Kay?
Yeah, and I mean, they go into detail about the frustrations they have with them.
And they have their own
system.
frustrations.
Are
It's
they-
just the system.
Are they from like?
They're from Placer and
and, okay.
Washoe, yeah.
Yeah, so they represent both states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else before I end class early?
Yeah, and then this is the
Okay.
sexual assault homework.
Oh yeah, that's the homework and
And the reason we're putting it on the board is if you guys don't get the presentation Thursday, this is on the test. So these are the answers to that.
What does SANE stand for?
Sexual assault nurse exam.
Oh, right, sorry.
That's not actually on the exam. I just wrote
Just
it
good to
down.
know.
People say stay nurse and you should know what it is.
Who pays for the SART bags and stuff like that?
So, our SART bags we create them and we pay for them through the California OES sexual assault grant that we get.
I have a quick question about who pays for SART. In here, I read that it says that after 72 hours, the state pays it. And, I mean, the state pays it, and then after 72 hours, like the victim is responsible for paying it. Is that, I read it here.
I'm not exactly sure what you're.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right.
Oh, okay, so what we're saying after the 5 days, so the state, it will only pay for the 5-day window, 72-hour window
Yeah.
that they have.
Yeah.
If you wanna get an exam past the date that the state has recommended that this is the cutoff date, then you have to pay for it.
Okay,
That's
yeah,
what it
that's what
means,
I was
yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah,
So like you came.
3 days though.
Yeah.
I think they've
Yeah.
updated though, cause Debbie told me 5.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
that's
says
like
like
that.
72 hours.
72 hours. I should update that.
And
Another
that's
thing
just
that's
to-
crazy when I went through it is the amount of pills and shots they gave me.
Wow.
Yeah,
I was just like, what
Yeah.
is
What?
all of
Why?
this?
yeah.
To
Debbie
prevent
Debbie
stuff.
says it's to prevent any disease
Yeah.
you might have
So they
contracted.
should be asking you if you would like those, but they will also
They
do,
did, but-
yeah, pregnancy.
Right, you're like-
and they
always
whole
do
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they have all that kind of stuff.
It depends, up to 5 days.
Oh, yeah.
They usually don't they usually prescribe a Plan B if the person suspects it?
Pregnancy?
Plan B.
Oh.
I'm planning to be like.
I think Plan B is like, it's only 3 days. I don't know
Okay.
about 5 days. I'm not
It's-
exactly
it's
sure.
3 to 5
It's in the
days.
video. But yeah, that's it. And so tomorrow we'll have the district attorneys come in and they'll talk about the role that they play in prosecuting domestic violence and sexual assault. So if you guys have any questions that you want to ask them, think about it tonight, write them down, and we'll ask them like we did today.
And we didn't really talk a lot about child molestation with the law enforcement, so if you want to ask questions, the DAs probably have the answers to those too, just because we.
Oh, another thing I wanted to hand out to you guys before you left is the room that Sergeant Hamilton or Palmer was talking about how the kiddo goes in, he only gets interviewed once, and everybody watches it instead of interviewing by like 6 people. So this. Okay. Can you pass these out for me? I'll go over. So this is like a little diagram, cool diagram about what the system used to look like for kiddos that were sexually abused or child abuse, and what it looks like today. So the front where it says child abuse system, it has, Robin tells her teacher at home she's being hurt. And then at school, who does Robin talk to? So she talks to the teacher, Robin talks to the principal, and Robin talks to the school counselor. So we're at 3. Can you keep count how many people? So we're at 3. Then the school calls social services, and then she talks to a police officer. And then a social worker talks to Robin. And then a detective assigned to the case talks to Robin, and she tells her story. Then she goes to the hospital, and a nurse talks to Robin, and a doctor at the hospital. And then Robin needs to talk to her attorney, the prosecutor. And then she also needs to talk about her story to a counselor. And we're asking, she has talked to up to 15 people by now, right? Possibly?
That's what it says on.
We're getting there.
Yes.
I think I missed the first.
So then you turn over, and this is what happens today. So she, let's see, number 1, down at the bottom left, Robin tells her teacher that is now being hurt, that she's being hurt by her mom's new boyfriend at home. Her teacher calls police or social services, and an appointment is made by Robin to go to Washoe County Child Advocacy Center. Robin comes to Washoe County CAC with her mom. Robin's mom talks to an advocate to help her understand the system and provides the services needed. And then over to the right, Robin tells her story to a trained interviewer while a detective, a CPS worker, medical worker, and prosecutor listen as a team. And then she talks to the nurse, and then she'll be referred to a counselor. You see how that cuts it like almost in half?
No short order.
So it's really cool kind of the way that they've seen people be traumatized through the systems that we've had, and that different advocacy centers are creating it so that now you only have to talk to 2 or 3 people instead of talking to 15. Only once, really, yeah.
She talks to the nurse and the counselor,
Right.
they're gonna break it apart for her.
It's super cool. They have this room with a forensic interviewer, and they have cameras in the room, or like a double mirror kind of stuff. And they all stand behind there, and they get 1 take, and that's what they all get. And they all get to pick their own little piece out of it.
Do they record it so they can go?
Yeah.
over it?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Is that admissible in court?
No. Because
that's the official.
It's done by a forensic interviewer that's trained not to lead children on, is what usually defense attorney will go towards, like, oh, the social service or the teacher asked leading questions, and that's why, like Penny said, it's very, you should be very careful when asking kids questions to not get them confused. And so that's why forensic interviewers will come
And
and do
Debbie, I
it.
think, talks about that in detail too, about how often people don't know how to talk to children and they'll interpret a situation completely different than the child actually meant. So
So you're
very
saying
important.
that is admissible or it's inadmissible?
The interview?
Yes.
No, that's admissible.
It is, okay.
If it's done in a context
Right.
outside of that, then a defense attorney can potentially attack it and discredit the person because they're not.
Yeah, so there's a prosecutor listening, so that means that,
Correct.
that's for the courtroom.
Right. Okie dokie. You're out a couple minutes early today.
Hopefully we
Have a
see
good
you